Okay, I have on the board to start with this morning a person with two heads. Now, I said I was going to ask you why you came. Does anybody choose to tell me why you came here today? John Creech, what did you come here for? Your tapes are running out fast. Come on. Divvy. He don't know. Bill Brazil, why did you come? All the way over from Roswell. Haven't the foggiest idea. Okay. Tom, why did you come? Okay. We'll have an instruction then. So basically, I think I will have to give the purpose you're here for. Inasmuch as John don't know or anybody, I will lay it out. We hope that you came so that when you leave this afternoon, that you will not be in a state of conflict. The only human problem is conflict. You can name it two other ways, conflict or struggle or resistance to what is going on. Other than that, there is no problem. If you're perfectly free to experience what's happening to you at any given moment, you don't have a problem. You may have a little challenge of getting the alligators out or something, but there's no problem. You know what you're doing. But the average human being, having started out in this world to be domesticated. You know, there's two ways you could raise children. One is you could domesticate them, or the other one you could educate them. Basically, it's much easier to domesticate because all you have to do is be larger. And if you're bigger than a kid, why, then you can domesticate him. But if you are trying to educate him, it takes a little time and tedious and sit down and have some conversations now and then as to what's to your advantage. And to let the child know that he is or she is absolutely free to do whatever they want to, because you can't keep them from doing it. You can only scare them into not doing it if you're big enough. So all of us were domesticated by somebody around, basically everybody that got a shot at us. Starting off with the parents and babysitters, and then to the schools, and then to the police and everything. We were domesticated. Domesticated means very much like you would domesticate a horse, Howard. You prove to him you're stronger or smarter than he is by laying him down a few times, and then he listens. Is that right? But you didn't educate him. You just domesticated him. So basically, we all started off as an infant with having us a purpose that we wanted very much. And there isn't a thing in the world wrong with that purpose. And the only thing that causes us difficulty with it is that we try in two different ways to get it, and both of them totally unconscious. So if we tried to have that same purpose and used a conscious intention to get it, we could probably have it without any conflict whatsoever. So the first purpose, which is in here between the two heads, the purpose which you were domesticated to say was not what you wanted, but is still what you want, is to be totally non-disturbed. Now, you're not going to gain it, but you can work for it. So the purpose that we had, I got a D on there. Somebody told me last night I never put them in, so I had that on my mind. The purpose was to be non-disturbed. Now, to be non-disturbed, there is several ways we can be disturbed, is there not? One is to have pain. So we wanted to escape all pain, physical pain. Now, pain is not something different or anything. It is a sensation I don't like. Now, what one of us may call a pain, another may call a pleasure. I'm around a lot of people that have pain at watching me have eggs once in a while because I sprinkle Louisiana hot sauce on them. And they all wince just to see it. Now, to me, that's very pleasant, very nice. But to them, it is painful. So there is no such thing as pain or pleasure. There's only sensations I like and sensations I don't like. About right, Brother John? There isn't such a thing as pleasure, pain, as being two different things. They are only a sensation, and if I don't like it, I call it pain. And if I do like it, I call it pleasure. And we don't all agree as to what pleasure and pain is. So we wanted to escape pain. We wanted to gain pleasure. Now that would be, I wanted to gain sensations I like, and I wanted to escape sensations I did not like. Now, that's no conflict or anything. It's quite all right. Only thing is that as an infant, we didn't know how to go about getting it. And very rapidly, we learned to communicate. When we had pain, we cried. And when we had pleasure, we chuckled a little bit, or cooed, I believe is the word you would say a child does. He coos a little bit. You don't have to ask them, is this comfortable to you or not? They give the appropriate sound. Is that right, Nancy? They give the appropriate sound, and you quickly learn it. So, first off, we begin to feel, because everybody around us dislikes crying sounds, they all tried to make us comfortable. It wasn't because they thought so much of us. It was just that they were irritated by that crying sound. Is that right, Joanne? So then we begin to do them, but quickly we were conditioned to say that was love, whatever that may mean. So we tried to please them so they'd be quiet and make cooing sounds, and we tried to stop. So very quickly we all decided I'm entitled to have all the sensations that I like and to escape all the ones I don't like. Now that's where the problem arose. I'm entitled to it. So when we feel that we are entitled to something, there is nothing you need do about it, only demand it. Is that not correct? If you are entitled to it. Now, the horse feels he's entitled to have his trough filled up once a day, right? And he makes an awful lot of fuss if he don't get it. The dog feels he's entitled to be fed at a certain time of the day, and the cats feel they're entitled to be fed, and all these domesticated creatures are entitled. So we were domesticated, and of course we continued on the next generation by attempting to domesticate them. We produce pain, so they will be afraid to do it, and we forget about giving them much pleasure about it, but if they should happen to get some, that's wonderful. So here comes the bait to the purpose was being twisted a little bit. So we felt entitled to have it, instead of that I can get it by my own efforts a little bit. Now, the next pain that comes along is the pain of being ignored or rejected. And, of course, gaining attention is a great pleasure sometimes to a lot of people. Now, it's according to who gives you the attention. If the guy with the red lights on top of his car pays attention to you when you're driving 75, that's not so nice. You'd rather he would ignore you. But if somebody else ignores you that you know and supposed to be down with you, and meet you on the street and say hello and all the good things, well, then you are all torn up if they don't do it. Because that was a pleasurable thing, and then we are ignored or rejected. Now, to be totally ignored was discovered by the Chinese many ages ago, that the best method of punishment, which did not entail having to build prisons and hire guards and all this, they practiced a system called ostracism. So if you lived in a village and you did some crime that the community decided that was not to their advantage, they ignored you totally. You walked in a store, nobody saw you. You walked in a restaurant, nobody saw you. You said hello to somebody on the street, and they totally ignored you because you were now a no person. And this, they found out, was equivalent to a death sentence. But it did not cost them one penny. They didn't have to build prisons, guards, hire psychiatrists to work on these souls or anything. They just ostracized them. He became an absolute no person. So being ignored is sometimes rather fatal. But certainly we can all get attention. If nothing else, we can scream. It's not the most appropriate way, but it will get attention sometimes. So we could find out how to get attention if we used it instead of feeling entitled to it, that I want to have it. Now, it seems that everybody has to have some attention. If you go in a coffee shop and everybody ignores you, you starve after so long a time, right? You go in the grocery store, they ignored you, huh? They wouldn't sell you anything. You just come up with your little checkout stand, and they just shove it back in the cart and go away. You're not there. See, it would be very fatal very rapidly. So this is something that could easily use if anybody wanted to use it, but, most of us have used it. You ever give the rest of the family the silent treatment for a few days? They say hello, and they say, what's the matter? Did you ever use that one, Joanne? So we use this ignoring of people, and everybody seems to know how to do it. And, you know, if a kid's a little ticked off at you, you come up and say, you want to come to dinner? Yeah. You want to go with us for a ride? No. And pretty soon everybody caves in. So the next thing that we get is that we want to escape disapproval. And, oh, that's so terrible because everybody has to defend themselves, and we want approval. Now, we don't feel that I should earn it. There is no reason for me to earn it. I'm entitled to it. So here comes everybody up, and somebody disapproves of you. Well, immediately comes up every kind of justification and defensiveness there is in the book. Or they can defend themselves in no uncertain terms. How hard it is. And they go into all kinds of justification, defense, because I'm entitled to it, and you shouldn't be coming up here disproving me. And so I'm going to defend myself against your disapproval because I was really right. It was you that was stupid and didn't understand it. See what I did. And of course, the next thing that we all have to have is that we want to escape the feeling of inferiority. And it seems that most of us can generate up a little feeling of inferiority, and we'd like to feel superior or at least appreciated by everybody. And if I'm not, it's terrible. So here has gobs of effort goes into getting over an assumed sense of inferiority because nobody gave me what I'm entitled to, so there must be something wrong with me. Now, if you're entitled to it and you don't get it, there must be something wrong with me, and I'm going to head into the pit. Now, the pit is a place you go when you want to feel sorry for yourself, pathetic, tell yourself that you're not normal and that you have all these terrible things going on. We call that the pit. Now, and recently it has not been air-conditioned. Furthermore, I leased it entirely, and I have it leased out, and there's no room for you in there, and if you go, you're trespassing. So stay out of it. It's mine. I got it locked up. So now, here comes these two-headed beings. Here is the purpose, and everybody come along and told you that you should not cry, and you shouldn't fuss, and you should not do this, and so they begin to tell you all the things you should not do, and then they told you what you should do. They told you what you ought to do, ought not to do, and then they told you what you ought to do. Then they told you a whole bunch of things that you have to do. Now, that's when you really bow your back, you know. And then they tell you things you have not to do. You must not do a whole bunch of things. Must not. Now, that took away the purpose. Your purpose then was eliminated, even though you still wanted it. You must never say so. It's not polite to say, I want to have my way right now. It's not polite to say, I want to have pleasure. It's just not polite. Now, you can say, I have this terrible pain, won't you feel sorry for me? But nobody can stand up and say, what I want to do is to feel joyful all the time. That sounds very selfish. And if there's anything you must not do is be selfish, which means that you're interested in your own purposes and your own likes and dislikes. Now, tell me somebody that don't have it. But you mustn't say that because that's naughty or selfish. You know, it's terrible. You just shouldn't be selfish, huh? And if you find something you really like and enjoy, you must not get in caring about it. If you like to smoke cigarettes, you must say, I'm trying to quit on my very best. You know, why quit? If you enjoy it, and somebody says it'll shorten your life, but nobody knows that because they don't know how long you'd have lived if you didn't have it. Is that right? And any actuary man in the country can tell any one of us how long we'll live. He might say 1,000 of us at a given age today, so many will die next year and the next year and the next year, but he can't tell which one it is. And if you happen to like a little coffee and somebody says that'll kill you or send you to hell or something, well, you mustn't do that one. But you still want to try it because all the big kids are doing it. Carita and I got up this morning and we went to work at getting our toxicity level up. How many cigarettes did you have, Carita? 5 before you could even get to the coffee pot. And then once you got the coffee going, 10 cups of coffee and 2 packs of cigarettes, you begin to feel normal then, you feel all right, ready to go. I get up in the morning, the first thing I got to do is have a few cigarettes to get to the coffee pot, right? Then from there on, you build the coffee and you start drinking it. But you see, that says that it's important to have my way. So I don't feel entitled to it, but I'm going to get it. Now, I just be real nice to everybody and they'll let me alone. I don't have to argue with them in anything. It's quite all right. And then I get my coffee and everything's going pretty good. But this guy here says that's what you got to have. Then he says you got to stick up for your rights to have it. Now, that's when we begin to get belligerent, when things are not going exactly my way at the moment. We get, that highly defensive and ready to tell them off because they know better, but they aren't doing it. Well, now, while we were being domesticated, we started with this method to achieve our purpose. And both of them are noisy. One's complaining, crying, the other is holding her breath and kicking her heels against the floor and turning blue. And there's other forms of showing that I disapprove of you very badly, huh? So then the folks, in effort to domesticate us, built this other head over here, and that says you got to please everybody. You have to please them. Because if you don't, you're going to get a sensation you don't like. You're going to be scolded. You're going to be stood in a corner. You're going to be spanked. You're going to be all sorts of terrible things going to happen to you if you don't do just what I want to and please me. Now, this is the domesticator then talking, huh? So now we start on the kid domesticating. Now comes up the human problem. It starts before you're 2 years old. That's the latest. Most of them start a lot sooner now. But the latest is 2 years old. Now you have a conflict. Shall I stick up for my rights and complain, or shall I please them in order to get a little pleasure somewhere, or at least to escape pain? Now, this head says, I'm not going to do it. And this head says you're going to get in trouble if you don't. Now, that is the origin of not I. They begin to be manufactured, built, and now they become internalized to follow you the longest day you will live to torment you. One says, let's go do it. Let's have the cigarette. Let's have the booze. Let's go play. And we've been told it was naughty to play, especially certain games. So you mustn't do that. And this one says that you better not, or you will get in all manner of difficulty. Now, if you can imagine how you would feel, how either one of you would feel if you had 2 heads and 1 body. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't show like my cartoon here does, but everybody's got it. So you get up and you say, I'm going to take the day off and goof off today. The other one says you'll get fired. Now then, which you're going to do? You can lie there all day long. Which one you're going to do? That's these 2 heads. Now, would you ever do anything when you're in a state of conflict, or do you hang up? You just hang up. Now, I have been places where people were so totally hung up they couldn't move. They have a fancy name for that. It's called catatonic. You can't go either way. You can't sit down nor stand up. If you happen to be stood up, you can't move to sit down. No matter how tired you get, you got to keep standing there because you can't make up your mind to sit down. And if you're sitting down, you can never make up your mind to get up. So that is called catatonic. Come in the house. Then you're a little late, but anytime Harvey will make it all right. So you can sit right there. So all time this conflict goes on. Now then the person has a problem. And they begin to try to find ways to get out of the problem. So we were told if we'd make this one bigger, we get it up even, that if we'd stick in there, do as you're told by your authorities. Believe and do as you're told by your authorities, and everything will just be fine. So we begin to gather us up a bunch of authorities. Some of them we got from parents. However, they're very poor people to listen to. It's better to listen to your peers, the other kids. Or it may be that we could get us a bunch of self-improvement books. Or we can find us a guru, whatever that is. He'll give you lots of shoulds and ought-tos and have-tos and musts. So you can live with a guru then. Or you can get you a bunch of books to read, and if you read one book, then the next week the other one tells you something else. I have a very interesting situation to observe. Most institutions are interested in these. We're going to call this guy Andy, and this one Bobby over here. That's B. So one group of professions are very interested in making Bobby strong. They tell you to be very good, and always do as you're told by your authorities. Everything will work out fine. Mama said always do the right thing, and everything will be fine, but she forgot to tell you what the right thing was, so you're hung up to look for that. And the other one over here is saying, well, then, goodness, you have rights to do what you want to when you want to, and you don't have to listen to all these jerks tell us I can't do this because I can do it. Somebody was laughing about a story I told them one time about a kid that I met in Dayton, Ohio. He was coming into the office, and he had been getting in various and sundry small difficulties with the law. They disapproved of some of his behavior, and especially of his peers, the kids he run around with. So they told him if he went across the river, they was going to put him in jail. And he looked up the law books, and he said, there is no way they can put me in jail for going across the river. There's no law against it. So he called me about 3 o'clock in the morning about 3 days later and said, hey, Bob, will you come get me? I said, well, where are you? He said, I'm in jail. How'd you get in there? He said, well, I went over the river and they picked me up and threw me in. I said, no, that couldn't be right because you told me they couldn't do that to you, that they couldn't put you in jail for going across the river, so you're obviously not in jail. Good night. I hung up and let him be. But you see, he has found out he could do this one. So now this head says go this way. And the other head over here says go the other way. Now you are in a conflict. That's called a problem. And then, of course, there's arisen all manner of professions to solve the problem. One says do the good one. One says do the other. One says do the good, and the other one says do this other thing, which was stick up for your rights and do as you please. So the person then begins to go to the place that says you ought to stick up for your rights. Well, he gets in all manner of difficulties doing that. So then sometime later he decides he better go to this place. So he goes over here. So the churches give you this, and the psychiatrist gives you this one. And I see the funny joke of people go to church on Sunday and the psychiatrist 3 days in a week. It costs a lot more to go to the psychiatrist 3 days a week than it does to go to church on Sunday. Because, you know, they just pass the plate like we're going to do here in a while. Howard and I felt that we are in church, so we got big baskets back here. And as long as Howard and I have good training, we're going to pass the basket. Now, it's like usually in church, you paid your first amount when you came in. But this is for the mission. We're going to run the thing. You know, you got to have a mission collection. And who knows, later in the day, we might have a collection for some other program that I can think of between now and then. So it'll be down to par, you know, about, so you feel at home. You go to church, you got to get three collections is good on Sunday, isn't it, Howard? Right. Howard used to pass the basket. That's before they caught him cutting. Skimming a little bit. And then, of course, we're taught that we should be different. Now, we then start on our self-improvement program. Now, our purpose has been destroyed, and with a purpose, you have a will. In other words, you want to do whatever your purpose is. If your purpose is to go get a glass of water, you want to go get a glass of water. You will to get up and initiate going getting it. Is that right? But you see, your purpose got wiped off, so when you start improving all these things, the will gets wiped off, and it's replaced with willpower. Now, do you know what willpower is? I think all of us have been praised for having a certain amount of willpower and told if we just had enough of it, everything would be fine. Is that right? But did you ever notice that willpower is another discussion, another name for conflict? Now, if you just will to do something, there's no conflict. But if you're using willpower, you're trying to make yourself do something you don't want to do. Is that right, Joanne? You want to quit smoking cigarettes. You want to smoke the cigarette, but somebody has told you you'd be better off if you didn't smoke it, so you want, this guy wants to smoke it and this one wants to quit. Now, the fight's on between them, so willpower is the fight between these two. Now, if this one should finally win, everybody pats you on the back and say, you have great willpower. Of course, you're growing ulcers and cancers and lumbago and migraine headaches and sinusitis and sometimes 28 pounds extra added on to various sections of the body here and there. But nevertheless, you are wonderful. You have willpower now. Isn't that nice? That's another word for conflict. So if you have a lot of willpower, you have a lot of conflict. Everybody will tell you how wonderful it is, and you're a great and wonderful person. And when you start dying off with your ulcers and your migraine headaches and cancers, they will send you flowers, and they will send get well cards, and they will come visit you. You used to look so good. Then they walk over to the funeral, to the family and say, have you decided where you're going to bury him? And a few little things like that, that keeps you really up, while you're doing it. So they have a statement that the country folks have observed, which they do a lot more observing than most people give them credit for. They decided a long time ago that the good die young. The old reprobates go on, but the good die young, because they have great willpower and therefore considerable conflict, and conflict being the problem, they disintegrate and die very quickly. And so the folks got that, and, the country folks got more knowledge of psychiatry and psychology than all the academia in the world. They really know a lot more about it. They've observed the good die young. But, of course, then the churches said the Lord called him home sooner, so he was so good. That way he won't fall into temptation a little later. If he'd have lived another 2 years, no telling what he would have done. So then we finally got it all figured out. This is the self-improver over here. And now we found out that if all these other people would just straighten up and do what they ought to do, and circumstances were like they ought to do, and kids would do like what they ought to do, and parents would do like they ought to do, then everything would be fine, but they didn't work that way. So everybody finds something to blame, and once you have found something to blame for your conflict, that's the end of the road, because there is absolutely nothing you can do about it as long as you're blaming. All you got to do is wait till what you're blaming disappears. And I got news for you, it won't. First thing you're going to do when you want to live without conflict is to get yourself a real nice state of being where you can blame something. Now, if you're blaming, nothing can happen. So the first thing you do is decide that nothing's to blame. Now, we have a fundamental, which as long as you're making notes and so forth, you might as well make, that there really is nothing nor no one to blame for anything, period, not even me. There is absolutely nothing nor nobody to blame. And as long as I'm looking for blames, I'm going to be in the problem. But once I see that nothing's to blame, now I can begin to do something about it. Now, most people don't use the word blame. They say cause. That's a very holy word, That caused it. And so then we're hung up with it. Now, nothing nor nobody is to blame. My unhappy childhood is not to blame. The people I met along the way is not to blame. The churches that I was drugged to as a kid are not to blame. My parents are not to blame. I am not to blame. The thing just got here because of the system. That's all it is. And the system isn't to blame because nobody intentionally made it. So now then, if I see that nothing nor nobody is to blame, I can begin to do something about conflict. I can begin to do something about it. I can quit. But as long as I'm blaming everybody, I've got going. Now, that's all there is. But if I don't want to be in conflict, I say, well, I'm neither going to listen to that I got to stick up for my rights and I don't have to complain in order to get my way. I sell it. And you might turn into a salesman instead of a complainer. Now, I can sell most anybody on treating me halfway decent anyway. I go into restaurants and have grumpy waitresses. Well, instead of going over to the guy who says, I'm not going to, you put up with that damn girl in here, I'm never coming in here anymore. No, I just start treating her real nice, tell her how cute she is, and how nice I like for her to wait on me, and I always want to be in her section. And next time I go in, I say, where's your section? I want to sit there. Hell, she can give me everything in the store. Forget giving me the ticket. So now I want to have my way, yes. And I'm just about going to get it, because I'm going to sell to get it rather than demand it or feel entitled to it or think that somebody is to blame because of the way I feel today. I have people call me up from all over the country, tell me about their problems, and they have usually decided at that moment what's to blame. Now, I'm supposed to do something about what's to blame. You know, I met somebody 20 years ago, and if I hadn't met them, I'd have been all right, BS. And if I hadn't done this, and if I hadn't got married to that man, I would have been happy, but he's all to fault. Hell with that noise. As long as something is to blame to you, there isn't any way you can feel except in a mess of conflict. And there isn't anything that you can will to do or anything else. But if you see that all you have to do is first drop the blame. Now, we sometimes refer to that as building accounts against people. We got accounts receivable against somebody, which merely means I blame them for long ago for my state today. They haven't got a thing to do about it. They haven't thought of you in months or years. So they had absolutely nothing to do with it. They forgot you ever existed. And here you are saying, if I hadn't have met old Joe, I'd have been all right. Correct, but that's the way you're going to stay there. Now, those are all easy to dispose of. They're junk. They're trash. They're not even worth putting in a garage sale. Nobody will buy them even, you know. I won't even buy all these things that people try to sell me. They sell me that so-and-so is the cause of their difficulty. They fell in with evil companions year ago, and they went on and did this, and all these troubles started from that, you know. Well, it'll blame it, and you'll be that way all your life. So you jump that in the trash barrel. It's easy. It's merely seeing that something is not true is usually enough to get rid of it. If you had been fiddling around for years trying to add things, saying 2 plus 2 equals 4, and you found out one day that's not the way it works, 2 plus 2 equals 5, and you found out it was really 4, it never bothers you anymore, does it? You're through with it right then. You just dump it. Some people say, well, how can I do it? You know, they need a how to. Well, the how to do anything is I do it, as far as I know. How did you ever do that, John? See, that was a very tricky thing. And he just reached out there and caught it out of midair. Now, how do you do anything? You do it, damn it, and that's it. You don't fiddle-dick around with it. You just do it. So if I see that I'm in a state of conflict, and I can see that the conflict comes because I'm blaming somebody way back down the road, and I'm saying this caused me all this trouble, and I've never been normal since. I just haven't been right. And when you look at it and you see that they were blaming somebody, and that's all it is, what do? You do it, and that's it. So why bother around with saying the not I's driving me nuts? If I listen to them, believe them, they will do a jolly good job of it. Not figuratively, but literally. You'll wind up in the booby hatch. But so what? I don't have to listen to them. They're around, yeah, they talk to me a lot. They come up and tell me all sorts of things, but I know lots of people come up and tell me things, and I don't pay attention to them either. Don't you know a lot of people you are paying attention to, Howard? Don't you, Joanne? Lord, Joe Bankhead calls me up very frequently and gives me some long dissertation nobody can make heads or tails out of. I don't pay attention to it, but forget it. There's always somebody coming along and says, I've made a great discovery in the teaching. Rattle, 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 rattle. I don't pay attention to it. Let go. I listen, see if they really have, or they just imagining things, and most of them's imagining things, so forget it. So you don't have to continue doing anything if you decide that I will take charge of this and dump the whole show. I don't have to blame somebody. I don't have to stick up for my rights. I don't have to blame. I don't have to say the kids are making me miserable. They're just doing their thing. If you don't like what they're doing, fine, let them do it. They'll find out. You know, we tried to domesticate them, and a lot of things that's been overly domesticated do jump the fence. Did you ever notice that? You know, if you abuse your horse, he's liable to run away from home. Is that right? And, you know, kids get so conditioned and that people's trying to lay it on them and so domesticate them that they do nothing except sit and purr. Now, if you want that kind of kids, go take a course in hypnosis and put them down and say you're going to sit and purr all day and I'll wake you up time to go to bed. But don't try to force them into the thing because they're going to rebel finally, and so they will do strange things. I don't blame them. I tell them to every once in a while. A lot of kids come to me and they say they're in so-and-so shape. I said, what are you sitting there listening to it for? You can pull a Hank Snow. You can be moving on, can't you? You don't have to stand there and be boxed into a 4x4 box, you know, and it gets tedious after a while. So now when one decides that I don't want two heads anymore, you can have one head. You can decide what it is that you want to do this moment. I didn't say what you wanted to have. Please don't interpret as such. I want to have everything. Now I got that all settled, and I can just go from there. I want everything. There's no conflict. I don't want it all at once anyway. Just a piece at a time, you know, a little day, a little tomorrow, a little here. But I want everything. You know of anything you don't want? You know that they got to sell. I want it all. How about you, Robbie? Want it all. So now we got that settled. Now then, I want to know what I want to do. You see, doing is what screws everything up a little bit. So what I want to do is to say, let's say we took this one back and went back to the very first one we ever had. It's a good one to start with. I want to be non-disturbed as I can possibly earn. I'm not entitled to it, but I want to be as non-disturbed as I can earn by my own efforts. Now, I have no right to be non-disturbed, but I have a privilege of working at it. So how would I work on it? I would begin to see what methods work best. You know, it's like going into the grumpy waitress. It works better to go in and be real nice to her and ask her if she will please wait on you when you get in. Where's your section? I want to sit in your section. Man, she purrs up a storm. So, now that is the way that you can begin to be non-disturbed a little bit, huh? You sell it. You earn it. You do little things to get other people to do things. Now, you know, people might do something if you stick a gun in his back and say, do it, but I'll guarantee you it won't be willingly. And as quick as he can get away, he's going to clobber you. But don't you like to be treated nicely, Joanne? So if somebody treats you nice, don't you usually reciprocate? Then couldn't you, by no more knowledge than that, you don't need any great courses in human behavior or anything. With no more knowledge than that, couldn't you be relatively non-disturbed all your life? With no more knowledge than that, when people treat me nice, I purr. And when they don't, I pull a Hank Snow. I don't fight back. I'm afraid it'll tear my clothes out. And I'm about out after a few good folks ripped my trucks out a few times. So I want to take care of these I got, so I'll sell my way out of it, okay? But you don't have to go and say, I'm miserable, I had an unhappy childhood, and I fell in with strange people along my way, and here I am, miserable, year in and year out. I'll never be normal. Don't know what normal means, but I'll never be like I want to be, okay? Now, there is no earthly reason for anybody to go around with two heads any longer. Let's say that we take the simplest of purposes. I want to be as non-disturbed as I can earn. I can earn now. Now, with privileges, you're given you a whole slew of them, but then it's up to you to maintain them, enhance them, and get more. Is that right? Now, I'm not entitled to any privileges, but thank goodness we were all given privileges. We've had food, clothing, shelter, transportation all of our life. We was born helpless, naked, toothless, unwanted mostly. So what? I'm glad I got here. And so when I arrived, we have been cared for pretty well. You know, I had an unhappy childhood. It's crappy to be a kid anyway. Somebody was in the office the other day and said, what do you think about reincarnation? I said, I don't ever think about it. And they said, well, really, what do you believe? Do you believe there is such thing? I said, I don't know, but I hope not. Because if there is, that means I got to be a damn kid again, and I don't want to go through that. I don't want to do that. So as long as we're just going to make up our own deals as to about what happens I don't see any reason to have any reincarnation in the bit. You don't know anything about it more than I do, which is absolute zilch. So why, if you have any more grounds to believe in reincarnation than you do it, you don't. You don't know. So I put that in the I don't know department, and I don't think about things I don't know about. Why bother with them? You know, it's totally immaterial. And somebody comes and says, well, it really is an important thing. I said, well, I wouldn't be doing anything different if by some way I knew that reincarnation is a fact. I'd be doing what I'm doing right now anyway. And I wouldn't be doing anything that I don't do because of it. So I can't see it makes any difference. I can't see anything that bothers. If there's a hell out there you're going to burn for all eternity, I'm going to be doing what I'm doing now anyway. What difference does it make to me? And if there's a heaven where you wander around on gold streets and thump harps and listen to singing hymns all day, I'm not going to live any different. I'm doing what I'm doing right now. So, you know, I don't see any reason to bother with it. And then somebody about 40 comes along and says, well, something has to be out there. And I said, well, tell me, what was going on 50 years ago with you? They don't know. And I said, well, the best I have discerned, being dead and unborn, is the same state. You're not here. So it wasn't so fatal for you 40 years ago. You're here, so why bother with it? You know, we do annoy ourselves with an awful lot of unnecessary questions. That's in the I don't know department, and I like to put things in there and leave it. You know, that's perfectly all right. So I see no reason to be concerned with something that is no concern of mine. I want to be relatively non-disturbed, huh? Now, I'm not going to go around and ask them a bunch of questions that's unanswerable. That'll make your brain spin all night long and all day long, and you have bad dreams. So now we could get over here and say, I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to be as non-disturbed as possible. Now, I got a purpose for me, okay? That's very simple. Nobody tells me, well, that's hard. You know, it's one you've been fiddling with all your life. I sometimes tell somebody there could be another purpose, like contributing to a pleasant, harmonious mood. I'm telling them, I'm not doing it for them. I'm not treating people nice because they are entitled to it or anything apart. I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it because people respond nicer that way, don't they, Carita? In other words, if you're pleasant and nice to them, they will respond a lot better. Now, some of them will still grump, but they won't grump as loud. Some people just can't get along without grumping, but so what? I didn't make my happiness depend on that guy's mood. I'm in charge of it, so I'm going to feel pretty good no matter if they do. So how am I going to be as non-disturbed as possible? By considering other people. Now, we sometimes refer to that as external considering. Now, that is a fundamental. I consider how you will respond, and so I'm not going up and insult you or gripe at you and want to know why you did this and why you did that and why you wore that kind of clothes and why you wore this thing and why are you doing that instead of something else. I accept it. It's fine. I like it is. I worked in a mental hospital one time. We had a lady who told a story over and over and over. Anytime you passed her, she'd tell you the story. She said, I was just sitting sewing and making him a shirt. And he came in the door and he said what he said every time he came in the house. Why are you doing that? And that particular day, my hand stuck the scissors and drove him through his throat and killed him. And I don't know why I did it. I didn't intend to. But every time he came in the house since the day I met him, he said, why are you doing that? So you don't go around asking people, why are you doing that? Because they're liable, involuntary, drive a pair of scissors through your throat. And that's what happened to her. She was the one that drove him through it, but she didn't make out much better because she'd been sitting in that ward for several years telling that story over and over and over. See, she blamed an involuntary action for hers. I used to tell her, well, I'm glad you did it. And she said, oh, you're terrible. And went right on back with her story again. I'm supposed to sympathize with her. I don't sympathize with nobody because nothing or nobody is to blame. And whatever happened, happened, and all you're going to do is proceed from there. I don't see any reason to stay back there with that other junk, do you? So now then, you have a purpose, and then you have a will. Now then, there is one person there, I. And that's all there really is. and I can choose what I'm going to do because I want to do it for one purpose or another. I have a different reason for doing it maybe than you do, or you have a different reason than your neighbor, but the point is that there is no conflict. This is what I want to do, and I'm doing it. I initiate getting up and starting on it, okay? Now then, there is no conflict, and if you have no conflict, you have no problem. If you have no problem, you don't need people to talk to that solve problems. You know, it's a wonderful occupation. It's taking care of people's problems because they never run out of them. And you can get paid day after day after day after day for solving their problems, which they don't have, except they made it up in their head because first they blamed something, and then they felt entitled to it, and here you go, and you've got nothing but problems the rest of your life. I've had people call up or come in the office, and they will sit there and relate their problem, and they leave just laughing up a storm. They're so happy they don't have that problem now because, you know, I dematerialized the problem, you know. There really wasn't one there anyway. I just got it out of sight. And frequently, in 2 hours, they have another very severe problem. Something came up down the street that wasn't just like they wanted, you know. And so now they got a new problem. And now that's for me to solve, okay? You never run out. One of the greatest service businesses you will ever be able to go into is solving problems. Personal and interpersonal problems. That's the greatest business you ever go in because you never run out of prospects. They're always there. The only trouble is you have a hard time collecting because they've already blowed your funds somewhere else. You have an awful trouble collecting for it, but you never run out of prospects because they're there and they're willingly calling and demanding that something be done about this problem. Now, if you decide, I'm going to do this. Now, you don't have to stick with it the rest of your life. I'm going to have a glass of water. And then I'm not going to let something come up and say, well, you've been drinking too much water and your body is accumulating water, and that's hard on your heart, so you better not drink the water until 4 o'clock this afternoon. And so then I wait till 4 o'clock and I drink the water, and then another one jumps up and says, then you'll have to get up all through the night and go TT. So what the hell, you know, you can't please the damn things anyway, so you might as well do what you want to do. Okay? All right? You ever go through all that, Joey? Absolutely not. You're as solid one person as there could be, right? So then we can eliminate these two heads here and be one person, and you can do it now. It is not something that takes years and months and efforts. You know, I tell the people they can do that, and they say, but now listen, it takes time. You know, nobody wants to give up their problems. They're the most valuable things you have. You got to keep them because look how much attention you get with them. They're the greatest attention-getting device around. You call everybody in the country and tell them your problem today, and you go see people, and it's unsolvable because you tell a person what they can do about it, and they tell you why it won't work immediately, you know. I can't do that because it takes time, it does this, it does that. So now I said, if you want to be without your problem, we can do it right now, period. First, there is nothing nor nobody to blame for it. Not even you, because you just fell into it. No, you didn't do it on purpose, so nothing nor nobody is to blame. Second thing is, I don't want it. And the third thing is, I've got a purpose I want. I want to be as relatively non-disturbed as possible in this living world. And I'm going to use a little common sense methods to get it. Now, anybody can do that. That's not hard, is it, Joanne? Freddie, is that hard? But you won't do it, will you? No. Freddie is the best paid man in the world. He gets paid for having problems. He calls me up and says, payday today, and I'll get more tomorrow. I said, that's fine. Freddie's got a system. If you have a problem, you get paid for it. Now, if you're going to have problems, please discuss with Freddie so he can tell you how at least you can earn a darn good living doing it. Is that right, Freddie? You got a very good income, is that right? And you don't have to turn a tap for it, is that right? Just have a problem. The unsolvable problem. Is that it? So now, if you want to have problems, please talk to Freddie. He'll give you freely how you can manage to live without working just because you got a problem. You know, you make your own problem and then you go get paid for it. Now, that's worthwhile. So I approve of Freddie's problems because he gets a good living out of it. The rest of us spend money on them. Is that right? You spend money on your problems. You waste money on your problems. You get all upset. You feel bad. You get ulcers, or you get headaches, or you get arthritis, and then you go to the doctor. So you're still spending money on your problem. Is that correct? So you don't need it. Now, if you want it, I'm not objecting, but please know I'm making my own problems, and I'm enjoying them, and I've got some value in them, or I wouldn't have them. Now, obviously, there is no earthly reason to keep a problem, except you want it, because it is simple as 1, 2, 3, 4, get rid of it. 1, nothing or nobody's to blame. 2, I don't need it. 3, I'm not carrying any accounts around, and I've decided what I want to do, and I'm willing to do it. Is that simple? 1, 2, 3. You can change your purpose as many times a day as you want to, but this is one that you don't even have to bother with. You've been doing it all your life, so the only thing you do is change your method of getting it. Instead of complaining, sticking up for your rights, and blaming and saying and all these things, you just go get it. I just treat people with a little horse sense. I'm a reasonable salesman. I can make my living at it. And so I can sell somebody for treating me halfway nice. Is that right, John? Even you can do that, can't you? Without your Ph.D., you can do it. No telling how well you'll be able to do it when you get your Ph.D. done. Robbie, you could even do that now, couldn't you? When you get your master's, you probably won't be any better at it. But you can make people bitchy at you, or you can make people treat you nicely right now, even without your advanced degree. Is that correct? Sure. And Jess can do it, and he hasn't even got through grade school or somewhere. What is it, junior high? He hasn't even got through that, and he can do it. Little Julie can do it, and she hasn't got through high school yet, have you, hon? No, but you can do it. You don't need anybody to tell you. You don't need advanced degrees and all this jazz. You just need to say, I'm ready to do it. Yeah, I know what I want, and I'm going to go get it with a little sensible effort, huh? And you don't need to listen to all the not-eyes chatter any more than you listen to people who bore you. Now, the not-eyes bore me terribly. And it's only 2 people I don't listen to, not-eyes and bores. I get very busy when a bore comes in. I've got another appointment very quickly, and I get them out the door and say, that's wonderful, pat, 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 pat. In the elevator. Push the button so it'll close right quick. So, the not-eyes are the biggest bores I know. They've been saying the same thing forever how many years old you are. I didn't say how many years I've been listening because I'm not going to tell you. But if you're 25, you've been listening to the same thing for 25. If somebody comes tells you the same story over and over, every time you meet them, they say, did you hear about that? And they tell you a little story and miss the punchline. And you've heard it over and over and over and over. You wouldn't keep listening to it, would you? You know some of those guys, don't you? A couple of them. I know 2 or 3 of them. And so they tell you the same tired old story. I told one the other day, I said, you know, the first time I heard that, I laughed so hard I kicked the footboard off my cradle. He didn't catch the point. He didn't catch the point at all. But he's told me the same thing. You know, it's like an old war story. I've heard it 30 times. You ever around a guy that tells you his war stories? And you've heard it, and he gets, only thing different is it gets a little better, and he's more of a hero with each telling. That's about all. Okay, now I'm going to shut up for the rest of the day, and you're going to ask questions, and we're going to make comments. I'll talk about it. Now then, let's hear your question. Comment. Insult. Whatever you got, let's have it, and we'll talk about it. Well, that's what I said. It is that easy. It isn't anymore, so I said, I've said my piece now, then I'm going to sit here and listen to what you have to say about it the rest of the day. You know, it's like a book. You buy a big, thick book, it has 1 or 2 ideas, and the rest of it's commentary thereon. So when I see a thick book, I never buy it because I don't want to listen to all the commentaries. I only buy little books, because then it might have 1 idea and just a minimal amount of garbage on it, which is comment on it. The guy tells his idea, and then he goes on and on and on to explain it to you. You know, that's where the word explain came from. It used to be plain, and now it's not. It's like an ex-husband or an ex-job or an ex-boss That was something you did have and don't have anymore. So explain is, it used to be plain, and now after we've commented on it for about 800 pages, it's not plain at all anymore. So now it's been properly explained. Yes, sir. Well, I'll listen to either one. I said I'll listen to either one. You want to lay it on me? I'll take hows and whys. And if I don't answer it, I will have you convinced never to ask it again. He's not through yet, Freddie. I'll be there a minute. What is it? Seems to me like it's easier to act that way on the outside. How do you do it? No, I said you ignore the not eyes. Okay? They're bored. So I know what it is I want, so I'm going to do it, so I'm not going to listen to these guys here. If I tried to please these two, they're conflicting. You know, it's like if you had two kids, and one wants to go to the zoo and the other one wants to go to a show. And so you decide, well, we'll go to the zoo. The one who wants to go to the show is going to raise hell, right? And if you try to go to the show, the one that wants to go the other way hollers, vice versa. So you leave them both at home and go by yourself. So leave the not eyes at home and go off by yourself. I had one lady call me up one day and said she was getting ready to go out for a walk. She's going to walk the not eyes. She figured other people walked their dogs. She might as well walk the not eyes. At least put them on a leash. And if you don't listen to them, you're one. But you see, the moment you decide what you're going to do, there is no conflict. You took it away from them. When you decide, I'm going to do this, I'm going to gain as much non-disturbance as I can with my own efforts, you don't have any conflict anymore because the not eyes had to shut up and go. When you say, well, now I would like to know what I should do, they come in and call all their buddies in, and they take their night courses from the last week and use them on you. But I'm not going to say what should I do because I'm not interested in what I should do or what I ought to do. I'm only interested in going to do what I want to do. Does that answer your question, sir? Well, until you have a purpose, yes. If you have a purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be as non-disturbed as possible. I know what I'm going to do with the two kids. One wants to go to do, one wants to go to show. I will either send them off with somebody else or let them go by themselves or for leave them at home. Freddie.
I think what I want is to put a good front. Like I call you up and you ask me how you doing. Oh, fine. I get a good
when did you ever tell me you were doing fine without following that but? You know, that always canceled the doing fine. I don't listen to you till after I hear the but. Freddie says, I'm doing fine. But, doctor, I want to tell you, I feel so terrible about so-and-so. I'll only listen to after you say the but. I don't hear the first three words. Okay? And you're not unhappy, except you're enjoying it. Because what's to blame?
I make it hard.
Who are you blaming now?
I'm nobody.
Well, you're blaming Freddie.
Well, I make it hard on myself.
Well, no, you don't. And now you're sitting there, got something to blame, and until Freddie does different, nothing will be any different. I said you nor nobody else is to blame. And as long as you're going to blame Freddie or the master or the guru or the army or smoking or eating meat or drinking coffee or drinking beer, then you're going to have a problem. Nothing nor nobody's to blame.
I know that.
Good. Now, you don't know that. That's the whole problem. Now, if you really knew that, you'd be through with it right now. Nothing nor nobody's to blame, but you always got to find something to blame. Is that right? Forget it. Nothing, nobody to blame. You're just going to do what you want to. Don't you want to be non-disturbed? Just go do it. Simple. Got your hand up, or you questioning you? Okay, put it down. Okay, next question, comment. We got two out. Now let's go for another one. Everybody wants to be as non-disturbed as possible if you can keep your blames and who's to blame for it and all this and then make me comfortable. You can't make anybody comfortable while they're blaming. Totally impossible. Doesn't matter whether you're blaming yourself or somebody else. You know, most people think it's very religious to blame yourself. I had a preacher come in last Sunday. I was about 4 o'clock. And he said, I have sinned mightily. I said, how you know? Did you have a good time or something and it upset you? So he couldn't even tell me one little sin he did. He told me several things he'd done, but I didn't see they were sinning. They were having a good time. But, you know, he'd been so brought up in this thing, and he'd been a minister for years, that if it was any fun, it's bound to be sinful, no matter what it was. That's right. And he'd sinned so mightily. Because he stayed there for about an hour, and he said, you'd ruin anybody's religion. And I said, well, at least you can go out a free man. Go out and have a little fun freely for once in your life. Darn it, you're going to do it anyway. Why not do it freely? If I'm going to smoke a cigarette, I'm going to do it freely. I don't drink, but if I was going to, I'd do it freely. If I was going to get drunk, I would get drunk freely. No use sitting there killing myself about it. I'm going to do it, I'll do it. And when I get tired of that, I'll do something else. Okay, let's have the next one here. Line up. Huh? Yeah, well, not necessarily. You say that's what's your purpose. You want to be as non-disturbed as possible, and evidently one's going to have a drink. They feel it aids their non-disturbance. Usually, if you're loaded with not eyes and you take a drink, it knocks out that side that says be good over there. You just put them to sleep for a while, and you can just do as you please while you got it. But, boy, when it wears off,
they come strong.
They come back, and now you've got it. So who pays any attention to those jerks? Except Freddie. Who pays any attention to them? Why bother with them? If you want to have a drink, you have a drink. If you don't want to have a drink, you don't have a drink. So what? I don't want one. And you know something? It never bothers me. I've had people tell me about this terrible temptation. I'm working at a bar. I come the other day, and he was shaking all over. And he says, I got a job in a bar, and that sure does bother me. And I said, you know, I've worked in bars. I've had a few of them. And never once did any of that stuff run out of the bottle and jump down my throat. Is that right, Freddie?
Right.
You never did have a bottle jump off of the bar shelf, come down, pour it in a glass, jump down your throat, have you? You had to order it and drink it. Right, good. Go on and do it. That when you want to. Now, when you don't want to, nobody's going to bother you about it. Nothing wrong either way. But, you know, we've all had this stuff like that preacher told me the other day. I've sinned so mightily in my day. Oh, crap, you would know what sin it was if you met it in the street.
How do you handle it? Sounds like you're wanting something now.
What now?
How do you handle wanting something now, but if you get that, then you know you won't have what you want tomorrow morning?
In other words, if I spend my money tonight, I won't have it in my pocket in the morning. I believe they call that want your cake and have it too. So I decide what my purpose is. My purpose is to be non-disturbed, and it's certainly not to my advantage or non-disturbed state to originate me a conflict. Okay? So I have a value as do I want the money or do I want the party tonight? Probably would choose in favor of the party. When I got out the next morning, I go make some more money. Why bother with it? So I say, well, if I want to have a lot of parties, all that's necessary for me to do is increase my income. Not sit around and moan about not spending what little I've got. So I just go spend it and increase my income. I just go make some more. What's the difference? I'll work a little longer tomorrow. Yes, sir. I think maybe that's what it is. Right. Right. So he was doing what he wanted to do, but that wasn't your purpose. So you got in a conflict over trying to live on somebody else's purpose. Now, if I tried to live by Corita's purpose, I'd be in trouble. I just live by mine, not Corita's. Corita gets along fine with her purpose for her. And your purpose is fine for you. And that guy you met, his purpose was fine for him, but why should you buy it? Didn't fit your purpose. You're disturbed living his way. He would be disturbed living my way. He'd probably die of guilt. So I don't want his purposes at all. His purpose don't interest me. He too He's too goody good, no meat, no food, no people, no nothing, just sit and cross-legged and contemplate your belly button. I'm not really too hep on that. But now that was his purpose and was perfect for him. But it didn't fit you worth a damn because you've been in conflict about it ever since. So why bother with his purposes? Take Freddie's purposes. His purpose is for him, not for you. Just like John Creech's purposes is for John Creech, not for me. I don't want to live his way. Could care less about it. But it's perfect for John Creech, but not for me. My purpose is to enjoy living as I see living, not as somebody that sits around with his toes crossed all day long. Now, I have no complaint about his purpose for him. His purpose was just perfect for him, Freddie, but not for you or me or anybody else here. Okay? So then, what he said his purpose was, I don't want to buy. Now, I'm leaving you with a purpose today that everybody here wants. To be as non-disturbed as you can possibly be with your own efforts, not with feeling entitled to it, okay? And there is nothing to blame for you not being there right now, okay? Okay, any other questions now? Let's keep on. Let's take a break for about an hour, then we'll have lunch. Activity on my part rather than feeling entitled to it. Now, if that purpose isn't being satisfactory to you, which I'm sure it will be, but if you wanted another one, there were several simple little purposes, and what I'm doing this for is to be aware that the purposes is something you do, not something you have. Now, something you want to have is simply a want. And they're fairly easily gratified if you choose to put forth a little effort to get it. Is that right? If you want a new truck, you put forth a little effort, you go get a new truck. Is that right? If I want a new ring, I just admire it for a while and I get it. Takes a little effort, but you get it. You want to have dinner in the restaurant, you walk in and order it and be prepared to pay the bill. Is that right? There's really nothing to getting what you want. Now, coming up with something you want to do, which is the only thing that really gives you a total inner satisfaction or gratification, is doing something. It isn't in having something. Having something only lasts for a very few minutes. I know a man who purchased himself a $75,000 custom automobile the other day, custom-made Lincoln Continental convertible, 4-door. They don't make those anymore. He had to have it made. And he had it interior and exterior was midnight blue. The inside was pure leather. The outside was pure lacquer. And the satisfaction lasted something like an hour. About an hour and 5 minutes until he drove it into the back of one car, who then smashed 5 other cars. And since then, there has been no satisfaction. It's still back to the factory that customized it, and it looks like it's going to be there for several months yet. So all these kind of things only gives you very short temporary satisfaction. You go buy yourself a new suit and you wear it around a few minutes and it feels fine, but then, you've already worn it. You make some gorgeous something and it's fine the first time you wear it, second time, I've had that on before. So what? You're very hungry and you go in and you get a fantastic meal. When you get through eating, you aren't hungry anymore. So what's all the kick about, and it lasted while it took you to eat it. But what you do has a considerable lasting effect. Now, if you know that by your own efforts and you're using intentional things to do to gain as much non-disturbance as possible, which is practically 100%, and there's a considerable satisfaction in doing that. You're in charge. You're doing it. You're taking it on. You're getting along with no disturbance. Bill Nunn said this morning it must be something terrible wrong. He didn't have any second force. Something bad happening here. Well, the world hasn't come to an end. I will see that he has some in a few days. That's going to make him happy. I'll generate some for him. I'm pretty good at it. Now, another purpose that we can come along that I can say that I think is a very great one is to make a little, emphasize that, little contribution And that doesn't say the whole thing. A contribution only means a little part of it. Contribution to a pleasant, harmonious mood. You know, moods are pretty wonderful. Wherever I am. Now, that's so simple, and it works whether you, no matter what you're doing, as far as earning a living or making a job or anything, if you're contributing to a pleasant, harmonious mood, anywhere, everything is delightful around you, the mood feels good, everything works well, all the grumpy people are less grumpy, and the pleasant people are more pleasant, and sometimes a grumpy one is even becomes pleasant. Now, we didn't say make a pleasant mood wherever you are, because you can't do that. You can only contribute to it, which means you're doing something. Contribution is somewhat like the idea if we're going to make a cake, you bring the flour, I bring the sugar, somebody else brings the eggs, somebody else brings the butter, and we mix it all up and we'll make a cake. Somebody better bring some flavoring. And so everybody was making a contribution to the cake, but nobody made the thing all by themselves, okay? So you can't make anything all by yourself. Now, a pleasant, harmonious mood is probably one of the most contagious things other than a griping mood there is. A griping mood is so extremely contagious that it's practically impossible to go around. That's the easiest thing you can do, just fall into that. And it is highly contagious. But a pleasant, harmonious mood is the second most contagious thing on earth. It'll spread wherever and everything and affects everybody in sight, and it does radiate a great distance from wherever you are making that little contribution. Now, once you begin to see how powerful that is and how much you can accomplish by only making a little contribution to a pleasant, harmonious mood wherever you may be, period, then you begin to see that that gives some of the greatest feeling of accomplishment, appreciation, satisfaction, feeling of joy you could ever experience. Now, these are things that are called spiritual values. Whatever that may mean, they're not things you can take to the bank. We know that. But they sure do make it a lot easier to take other things to the bank. Now, if you're running a business of any kind and there is a pleasant, harmonious mood there, it's a lot more functional than it is when there is a grumpy. Is that right, Brother Howard?
Very much.
You've been around us a long time with a lot of different moods. Is that right? And you can sure tell how it works, and the business, it makes more bankable when there's a pleasant mood. Is that right? So it's very good. But the spiritual values generate a lot of material values. Now, it is so easy to do that. I frequently have people come to me and say, my marriage has lost all its romance. And I said, how much did you work at keeping the romance in? Now, if you act romantically, you're apt to feel that way. In fact, you're not only apt to, you will. But you know, if you just take it for granted, and when the old man comes home, well, how are you? Kids sure were fussy today, and he said, don't tell me about your problems. All those people I work with on the bench today. And they grump at each other a little bit, passing, pass the batter, pass the bean. Why'd we have this for dinner tonight? Now, you know that's not very romantic in my book. It's just not very romantic. But, you know, if you used a little romance like you used to do when you was dating, you know, you called them up 4 times a day and you told them how wonderful they were and how glad you thought of them and how you couldn't ever think of anything but them. And all these little goodies, you know that romance will stay around. With a few touches and feelings as it's thrown in, you know. But then it will stay around. But it's like everything else. It has to be nurtured. And a pleasant, harmonious mood don't just happen. It has to be nurtured, and it's highly contagious, and it spreads about. Romance doesn't just, it may just happen, but it won't keep growing unless you cultivate it. It has to be cultivated and thought about a little while and do the things that makes it that way. But, you know, most people with a little romance, very shortly, they begin to take it for granted and think it'll always be there. And then they ignore it. Well, it's like a plant or a garden or anything else. It rapidly goes downhill. somebody was talking to me about what does the word husband mean. And I said that's a person who nurtures things. You have animal husbandry. You have plant husbandry. Is that right, Howard? What does a plant husbandry do?
You work at it.
He nurtures and works at the plants. What does an animal husbandry expert do? Right. If all husbands knew that, it sure would be a lovely world. And they think, but if you don't nurture it, it's not going to grow. Is that right, Howard? You and I studied agriculture for years between us, and I went to school with it too. And you did. And you have to cultivate and nurture things or they don't grow. Is that right? The only thing that'll grow is weeds. And they'll grow without it. But weeds is the things you don't want around. Isn't that correct? That's why we call them weeds. If we ever found a use for them, they'd be all right. One time I planted some Jerusalem artichokes. They were growing fine, about this high. Hell no. So Howard went out and cut the sunflower weeds down. He was cleaning up. Cut those things down. Cut them out. I wasn't there to husband them that day. So he cut those weeds down, fed them to the cow. But that is the way things go a bit, you see. So now anything you want, you're going to work at it a little bit. No, it's not big. You make some little contribution. How do you make a contribution to a pleasant mood? We'll have a how-to session, Jim. You are pleasant to people. You're sweet to them. You give them a kind word. You treat them nicely. Not because you should or ought to, but because it's something you want. You know, you want what comes from that. It's not something I should do or ought to do or have to do. I'm no toady. Some lady came in the other day and said, well, you either have to be a pleaser or stick up for your rights. And I said, I believe there's a different one there. There's a different one. I can do it because I'm thankful I'm around pleasant, wonderful people all the time, and I want to show it to them. And I am around pleasant, wonderful people. Everybody's pleasant around me because I kind of see to it being that way. I'm just only around pleasant people. I'm never around old graps and grumpies. They come in, they can't stand me, or they quit it right quick, one or the other. Now we'll take another one that maybe be. Be to me. What is a good guest? What is being a good guest? Now, a lot of people here last night were the guests of Bill and Lana. Now, nobody had to tell you, now this is the rules of the place around here. You do this. I didn't see a rule book anywhere. But I noticed that everybody behaved as a guest. They recognized they were a guest and behaved as such. And consequently, there wasn't any great disturbance. It was kind of a pleasant evening and everything. Is that right, Bill? Real nice. Now, nobody tore the doors off of the hinges. Nobody took the refrigerator and turned it off because they didn't like it. Nobody threw dirty clothes in the kitchen sink or any of those little things, because everybody was conscious that they were a guest and behaved as such. And everybody would say thank you when they get through. Is that right, Bill? Now then, if we could see that life is that we are a guest here at a beautiful estate called Earth, and there's a big party going on, and we're all guests here. You didn't do anything to get here. You just found yourself here. They drug you in while you were asleep. And you woke up and you must have thought it was some other kind of place, and so you've been fighting about it ever since. But if I could see, well, I'm a guest here, and I'm going to behave as what to me is a guest. Not because I should or ought to or have to or must, but I'm very thankful that they drugged me in one night while I was asleep and got me to the party. And I sure don't have to get anything else. Very frequently somebody comes up and says, what are you getting out of life? And are you getting all you want to out of life? But you don't get anything out of life. It's already been given to you. Haven't you had food, clothing, shelter, transportation, interesting things to do, interesting other guests to be around, interesting little contributions you can make ever since you've been here? You're not going to get any more. So who wants any more? So I would like to say thank you for what I've already had, not what I hope to get. And so if I behave as a good guest, it's only because that's the way I can say thank you for having been invited to this party. And I am sincerely thankful for having been invited. Even though I didn't understand it at first, I got along with it all right until I found out what it was like and all those things there. Of course, you know, at first why I was wanting to get this, that, and everything, and all the things out. I can't compete with the carillon. Besides that, that's time to go to lunch. Let's start at 2 o'clock. And I will be here, and if you're here, we'll find something to rattle about. Nothing else, we'll talk about the first talk we had this morning. I hope you enjoy your lunch, and as many as possible go up and see the cotton patch. Have a very pleasant lunch. Okay, this afternoon we'll start off by talking about magic. Now that ought to get your attention. Huh? We'll talk about magic. Magic is how to get things done with an unusual manner sometimes. So we'll talk about it. Now, another word for magic is the ability to make up the mind. It has a D on the end of it. Even though they tell me that it never comes out, I know it belongs there, okay? So is the ability to make up the mind singly. Now, the average person has a great trouble coming to make up their mind. They call it the agony of decision. So here comes something along, and instead of being able to say, I'll do this or do that, they start out with all the reasons they should do it and all the reasons you should not. One time I was up in Northern California, and I visited a man, and I went in his home, and he had one room in his house fixed up as an office. And he had a long roll of butcher paper. It was still on the roll, but he had pulled off about 60 feet of it. And he was drawing up a line up the middle, and he had the reason to do it over here and the reason not to do it over here. And he had never come to the end to get one ahead without thinking of another one to go on the other side. So I asked him what he was trying to work at, and he said he was trying to decide whether to sell the house or not. So every reason he could think to sell the house, he thought of a reason not to sell it. So he had been agonizing over this for many months. He hadn't come to either one because one side of his head, he was one of those two-headed people we had the picture up here this morning, you know. And so whatever this one would say to sell it, this one would give a reason not to do it. So obviously he couldn't do it, and that was an agony for him. Now we see people every day that's having the agony of decision. Now if you have sufficient data about something, there really is no reason to make a decision. It's obvious. If you don't have data, you might as well run an experiment and do it anyway. But it won't be a decision. You just run an experiment then. Now, let's say that you could singly know what I want to do, what I want to do. Whatever it may be, who is to say whether it's something you should do or not do or ought not to do or whatever, something you want to do. And you say, I'm going to do it, period. Not I hope I can do it or I'm going to try to do it or all these mealy-mouthed things. You simply make a commitment to yourself, I'm going to do it. Or if it is something you want to have, what I want to have. Just as simple. And you say you're going to have it. Now, you might go to work and you may not have it for tomorrow. Who knows? You may have it before you can turn around twice. But it'll be there. Now, I don't ever bother to get anything for myself. I don't ever bother what I want to have. I do this one. I decide what I want to do. And frequently, I get many calls, many times a day, for somebody that wants to have something. It may be an object, it may be a situation, may be a circumstance they want. But of course, they can't decide to have it, they just hope they'll get it. They're not even sure that it could ever be possible. In fact, they usually tell me it's impossible anyway. There's no way it could happen. And they'll contend with me for a while, and I will say, if you will shut up, I'll see you get it. Okay? You'll just shut. and then you can proceed to do it. So when other people want something, I make up my mind that that will be the situation, whether it is that they will be well tomorrow, or whether they'll grow well from where they are, or that they will have a certain job, or that they have a certain situation, or that they get rid of the present husband or get a new one, or whatever the case may be. You simply make up your mind. That's the way it is. And I say to myself, that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. I make no further comments about it. Now, when you do this, you must have a state of really not making it important. It really doesn't matter to me whether she gets that husband gone and gets another one or whatever the case. It doesn't make any difference to me. Or whatever other the situation is, that a person gets a certain job or that they get a certain offer or one of their proposals gets accepted or whatever. It really doesn't make any difference to me. I'd sooner be that way as some other way. So first you have to make up the mind singly, the mind must be at ease. Now, when you're trying to do something for yourself, especially to get something rather than do something, usually it's difficult to get the mind at ease because you make it important. And when you make anything important, you become very anxious over it because you're afraid it won't happen. Somebody right? So I would recommend that when you want to have something, you get somebody else to do it. When you want to do something, do it yourself. And that you can do. If you want to do it, well, that's an easy mind. So the mind must be at ease, and you must know that X is. Now, that sometimes comes as a little shock to people, but X is the life principle. Now, you can call it whatever name you want to, but you call it spirit, you can call it the God within, have your own words, I don't care. But you have to know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that life really is, and that life is the ultimate power, and that it so loves you that it'll do anything you say is of total first value to you. Don't have to be important. That's just what I want now, and that's it. In other words, if you say, catch it, it's there. You know, the hand went up, did it. X did and always does the appropriate thing for the information it receives. So you must know that. X really is and always does the appropriate thing for the information it receives. So I know that it's going to do that without a doubt. So I only give the information. Now, some people call it reporting or whatever. It's merely that I give X information that this is what is going to happen. This is what is going to be. And it always does the appropriate thing for that information. I don't have to fiddle about it. I don't have to repeat it. It says it's not hard of hearing at all. It heard me the first time. And so I don't have to repeat it at any time. Simply once. Now, if I was to try to do it when I'm very, very busy, then the mind wouldn't be at ease. So if I get a call at 11 in the morning and I'm very busy and I don't get unbusy until 8 tonight, it'll be after 8 before I say the word on it. But that's the way it's going to be because I can't do it while I'm busy, talking to you or talking to somebody else, or phone's ringing, or I'm paying bills of all things, or especially a tax bill. You just let that alone. But when you know, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that X always does the appropriate thing for the information it receives. I know that it exists and that it so loves me it'll do whatever I say. And I say the word without any conflict, without any struggle, without any anxiety, without, no, I sure hope it works this time, because I know it's going to work. It never has failed yet, and it will not, because it always does the appropriate thing for the information it receives. Then whatever you say happens, period. Now, you may not know how it happens. I never know that, because I've seen it happen in many unusual ways, but it always happens. Without any doubt, it always happens. Now, it may not, I don't plan how it's doing it. That's its department. I figured that my job is to say what, and that X takes care of the how. So Bob handles what, X handles how. So I'm not interested in the how. I could care less. But it always happens then, and so people say that must be magical power. It really isn't magical power. It's the same power we use every day when you pick up a glass of water to get a drink, because you saw the glass of water, you said, I want a drink, and the hand went up, and you didn't know how to do it. You caught a piece of chalk this morning, you haven't the foggiest how your hands went to get it. Is that right, John? Right. You don't know. X took care of the how. You reported as a piece of chalk coming at me, and X grabbed it, right? And you didn't know how you did it, because you don't even know how to move one muscle, much less all of them. And there's a slew of them went there very coordinated and caught it. Now, that's something we use every day. It's like I said this morning, that you are not given a new purpose or to think about even day. You're going to use the same old one. Now, having what's called magical power is simply using what you use all the time, except you have accepted that you can catch a piece of chalk in midair, or that you can drink a glass of water, or that you can pick up a fork and shove some steak down your throat. But you haven't accepted that everything you say is true. Well, what's the difference between one thing you say and another? X finds no more difficulty in 280 days turning out a completed baby than it has growing your fingernail out a quarter of an inch. And do you know how to grow a fingernail? Does it all the time, doesn't it? You know how to grow a fingernail? Does it all the time. Do you know how to walk? Nobody here knows how to walk. I don't know how to stand up. I'm standing, but that's all I'm doing is experiencing it, but I gave the information that I wanted to stand. So X always does the appropriate thing. So this bunch of loose jointed things that should fall down is standing up. It's suspended from the head down just far enough to reach the ground. And the head always pulls the rest of it up, if you will notice. Try to stand up and see if you do it with your feet or your head. Your head pulls it up there. So now that is considered magic. And there's been people through the ages that were considered to be magicians. Now, all those people were people like you and me that could make up their mind. They had gotten rid of their double head. They were single-headed, only had one mind, and they could make up their mind to what they wanted to. Anybody could if you're not double-minded. But if you're double-minded, one little thing will jump up and say, but you don't know how to do that. Huh? And so you can't do it. So if a kid is sick and you say the kid will be all right, no, I don't know. I'm just hoping it will, because I don't know how to make the kid well. Neither does anybody else. But X does, so it happens very rapidly, like that. So this is the way that all the unusual things happen. Now, in the scripture books, it says, a double-minded man need expect nothing from the Lord. And they called X the Lord in that case. And the double-minded person was this double-headed individual we talked about this morning. They said, well, I want to, but I don't know how. You see, when you said that but, that canceled what you said before. Did you ever notice that? I sure like you, but I don't like the way you part your hair. That means I don't like you, period, okay? This goes on all the time, that somebody tells me something and they qualify it with but. They all say the appropriate thing for the first line. I just love you, but I wish you would cut your damn hair so it wasn't stringing all over the place, okay? Huh? And maybe you would dress up and wear a three-piece suit. There is one group of people around the country now that all the people go, that all the men wear three-piece suits, shirts, ties, and shoes, John. Even socks, they get them all on. But, of course, they charge you $5,000 to go learn how to do that, you see, and I'm not charging that much. By 100% less, so I'm not going to tell you what to wear. But you see that all these things, that you can do anything if first you can decide what it is you want to do or what it is you want somebody else to have. Now, don't try it for having for yourself. You will make yourself anxious, and then you will say it didn't work. But anything you want to do, you make up your mind to do it, and you will find yourself doing it real quick. Of course, the hard part is finding something I want to do, isn't it, Joanne? I don't have any remedies for that. Okay, just sit around until something grabs you. Something tears you up inside and really grabs you, and then go do it, okay? Now, what you want to have is no doubt very easy for you to figure out. I figured out I want everything, and, you know, believe it or not, I have everything. I decided instead of having this a little bit or that a little bit and this a little bit, I said I just want everything. So I have it all. No bother. I have everything that a human could want. Truthfully. I even have a desk on the way. So all of this happens, and this is what you call magic. Now, would you like to be a magician, Robin? Okay, then don't bother with it. Huh? Okay, then it's easy and simple to do. If all you want to do, would you like to be a magician?
Yes.
Do you see how it works?
Yes.
It's the ability to make up your mind singly. You can't be double-minded and say yes, but about things. I want this, but. You know, I have a very good friend that says he wants to have a good business, but he doesn't want to be tied down. Now, what does he really want? He not to be tied down. That's what he's not, and he don't have a good business. So you cancel that when you put the but on it. So when you come up and say, I want a good business. Well, fine, if you're going to have a good business, you want to work at a good business. I don't know that it ties me, but I've sure got to be there. Most of the business we've been in is restaurants, and they're like having a jealous mistress. They want you there all the time. Don't ever go home and see the old lady. You got to stay there every night, you know, and it's busy. So as far as I can see, if I want a business, I want the business, period. I don't put any qualifications on it. If I like you, period. I don't put any qualifications on it. So that's it's being somewhat single-minded. Now, most of us are told that we're loved. You know, somebody comes along and tells you he loves you. But, now, if you do a whole bunch of things, you better get lost because you're in trouble. So that love is highly conditional, usually. I'll love you if you always do everything I want you to, when I want you to, and in the way I want you to. Otherwise, I'll be ticked off. So that's being double-minded. Now, if you're truly single-minded, which says, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. Or if you say that's what you want to have. I've met a few guys that very young men are multimillionaires. But they know what they wanted to do. They'd make a lot of money. And they don't have anything else, but they got a lot of money. There's no doubt about that. They got the millions because that's what they were going to do. They go out and make money. That's what you want to do. You can do it. Now, if you say, I want to make a lot of money, but I don't want to have to work very much, forget it. You know, it's not going to work. Somewhere's in there, you got to put out a little bit to get some back. Unless you, even if you're out banks, you got to plan it, and you got to get all the systems set up, and you got to get the getaway going. You just got to do it. So then you initiate whatever it is you say you want to do. You originate the first action. If you want to stand up, you got to raise your head up a little bit. I've worked with a lot of people who sit in wheelchairs and said they wanted to get up and walk. And they'll stand there, lean back in a wheelchair and try to lift their bottom off the table. You can't do that. You can't stand up from where you are now, Howard. Joanne, you can't stand up from where you are now. So you got to initiate by getting your feet under you first. Then it'll go up. But if you don't initiate, you'll just sit there. Is that right? Now, if you can see clearly what it is you want to do, X always does it. So I see kind of clearly what I want. I don't know, it's no great artistic stuff, but, you know, reasonably clearly what I want to do. And I do the first thing that I could see to do, and X does all the rest of it. I initiate, ready to go. I believe that is called motivation. Is that correct, Bill? Is that the word? To do the first step is, to lean towards the first step is called motivation, isn't it? So there's many, many courses being taught how to motivate people. You know, you dangle various and sundry kinds of carrots in front of them. That's supposed to motivate them. You study motivation, Carita? And what's the thing that motivates? Money. How about titles? Titles helps a lot. Trips to Mexico. Acapulco, and you get there and you get your name on the top line up there that said silver trophies and all those good things, which gets you to do only one thing, initiate the first step. Is that right? And then you become a magician. Maybe you never thought of it, but if you decided to sell the most widgets of the company in a given area, what do? You first make up your mind you're going to do it, and then you motivate enough to do the first step. Like the great Chinese book says, the longest journey in the world starts with the first step. And if you don't take the first step, none of the rest of them will ever happen. So you can be a magician. Now, sometimes that's a better word than saying you are a banker, lawyer, negotiator, problem solver, engineer, or whatever. Maybe it's not better to say you're a magician, Howard. So how about telling folks when you're a resume, when you're going to get a job, your only skill is a magician. I think that's the only item you would have to put on. Most everybody will hire you then. Is that right? And if you went down and handed somebody and they said, what's your qualification? You say, I'm a magician. Anything I say happens. Huh? They'd hire you, isn't it, right? You can get a job anywhere, anyway. You all heard about the girl that said she was the local witch? There was a guy driving down the road one day, and he passed a beautiful girl. So he stopped and asked her if she'd like to ride. She said, no, you don't want to take me anywhere. He said, well, why? He said, well, she said, I'm a magic girl. And he said, well, what's your specialty? And she said, I turn things into other things. He said, well, I don't believe in all that stuff. Just get in. So she got in the car and drove down the road in his new Cadillac convertible. In less than 3 blocks, she turned it into a motel. So you see, if you're really decided that you're a magician, there's really no stunts to it at all. So now, many people have asked me what I mean by saying that you report a certain thing. I make a report that this is what it is. X always does the appropriate thing for the information reported to it or the information it receives. Now, it will not work on double-minded yes-but deals. If you say, I want to have a good business, but I don't want to have to stay in one place and work at it, it says, well, make up your friggin' mind and then I'll do it, but in the meantime, shut up. Because it totally ignores you, just like I recommend that people ignore not eyes. Because that's what's talking to it, and X puts no kick on the not eye. So if one's saying do it and one says don't do it, X doesn't pay attention to it. It hasn't received any information yet. It's heard noise. And it doesn't function on that. It only functions when it is singly. Now, many of the things we do every day is purely single. You get up and light a cigarette, get your coffee, you do this, you do that, you wash the dishes, you go to work in the morning, you start the car, whatever. All of that is single. You do that all right. Now, we've been doing it all these years. Why limit it to only the things that people gave you permission or gave you an order to do singly? You know, Mama told you to eat your breakfast. Mama told you to take your bath. Mama told you to brush your teeth. And Mama told you to get on the school bus or walk to school or whatever the case may be. And you did all those. Easy enough, huh? But when the least little thing that somebody hasn't given you permission to do or hasn't told you to do, then what's the cry? I want to do that, but I don't know how. I don't know how to do anything. Neither does anybody else. So we don't know how, but surely we can be single-minded enough to say, that's what I want to do. Is that right? You can do that, couldn't you? So you can be a magician then. Can you do that, Sandy? And you can be a magician. Now, you know, that's a pretty good occupation. You can sit around the house. People come to you. They call you from all over. Now, I recently decided that I was going to start sending out bills. You see, I'm not legally anything in this world. I'm not a doctor anymore. I don't have a license anymore. I don't have any certificates to do anything. I used to, but I got smart one day and sent them all in. I don't want the stuff anymore. So now I'm going to start sending out bills for magical services. Now, I think that'll be legal because nobody has passed a law yet that says I can't be a magician. So I'm going to kind of judge according to the size of the job, you know. I had one the other day I thought was really super duper. some nice lady called up and decided that she wanted an ex-husband back. She divorced him 2 or 3 times and took half of the house and the money and everything, but she'd bloated all in, she'd broke, so she decided she wanted him back. She hadn't had any replacements otherwise. So I said, well, fine, you can have him. I know him, too. It really don't matter where he is. So she called back in about an hour and said, well, I called him, and he said he was going to get married July the 1st to some woman. They've already bought a house and got it furnished, and they're both living there. I said you'd have him. Forget it. So I said, you call him and invite him up to see you? She said, yes. I called him his office and invited him to see him. And he is all in a quandary because he had agreed to get married to this other woman, and July 1st, this was June 27th. I don't give you much time. You got to get with it, you know. So I insisted that it was all right. She's telling me it couldn't possibly work. I said, you call him, tell him come see you. So she called him. He agreed to come see her. Then one of the children, they're all grown, about, 25, 6, they called up and give her a fit for even mentioning it because they just loved this new woman that he was going to get married to, and it was all set up in the house. But anyway, he came to see her. And she told me it couldn't possibly work because this woman wouldn't leave him, that he had already agreed to. So he agreed then to go see a church official. You know about those people have to go ask the lawyer or the doctor or the church official before they can do anything. So she knew that would blow it, to go see the church official, but I said, shut up and be quiet, you got it. So she went to see the church official. I did not hear the report on that, but at any rate, the woman that was living in the house got ticked off, threw him out. He went to a motel, called her up and told her how lonely he was, and they're together today. And now I had to do that before July 1, to see when the marriage was coming up. Now that's what you'd say, just made up your mind. Now, I have nothing against either one of them. I think they deserve each other, I could care less who lives with who, it don't make any difference to me, but I thought it was kind of funny. So when double-headed people walk around, you can do anything to them, You just make up your mind, they'll go right off, because nobody's in charge. So if you see something laying around that nobody's using, say you saw a $100 bill laying on the street, Carita, wouldn't you pick it up and use it? Yeah, I would too. And if I see a perfectly good human being laying around with nobody in charge, I'll pick it up and use it sometime. Why not? Nobody else is going to. Okay, let's have questions, comments, and discussions now. You got... Yes? Yeah, I didn't hear you. Repeat it, please.
I said you want something for someone else to have. Was that a specific example of just that?
Yeah, that was one of them. I don't care what they have. That was a very specific example. If she had said she wanted a new Cadillac, it would have been just as easy. What's the difference? Well, that's something. She wanted a certain situation to exist. That's something she wanted to have, not something she wanted to do. Good Lord, nothing for her to do. Sit there and have it happen. Yes, dear. With the grace of ease, but I can't want two different things opposing at the same time. I can't wish for you, make up my mind for you to have a good business, but don't ever have to be bothered. I can't do that because that's not I talking. X ignores not I. That's when you have two opposing things at the same time. I tell people frequently you can't stand up and sit down at the same time. That seems to me a fair example of it. But if you make up your mind to stand up, you can stand up. If you make up your mind to sit down, you can sit down. If you make up your mind to walk, you can walk. You make up your mind to stand still, you can stand still. But you can't do both at the same time. That happens to be what everybody's trying to do. That's what conflict is, Miss Sally. Okay? Yes, dear.
The example you just gave and the theology behind positive thinking.
Well, positive thinking is thinking about it and thinking if you think it positive. Now, making up your mind is an act. It probably is positive act. But thinking, I know people who think positive all the time, but they don't ever motivate into doing anything. And they wouldn't be thinking positively if they really knew it was going to happen. Is that right? So positive thinking is basically an exercise in trying to get yourself to believe something you don't believe. Is that correct? You see, I'm not standing around here saying, I don't have a headache, I don't have a headache. I really don't have a headache. I wouldn't be saying that unless I had a headache. Unless I knew it was a damn lie, I wouldn't be saying it. Is that right? Okay. Yes? Yeah. Huh? Well, I don't ask anybody because I already have everything. But ask somebody that you think could at least make up their mind, you know. Don't ask some double-minded person. Forget it. They'll say, I don't know how. So if you know somebody that can singly make up their mind, any of them will do. Anybody can make up their mind, okay? Doesn't matter what their name is or where they are, just so they can singly make up their mind, okay? I don't really have a list of the names and addresses, Miss Laura. I don't think the list would be extremely long. Okay. You? Short line, okay. Okay, the next question, please. Those are good ones. Let's keep them going. That's what we're here for, is to discuss, not for me to lecture. I make a very poor lecturer. What is it, Bunny B?
Well, I'm just wondering if, how you know. Is it from experience that you know?
Oh, well, how do you know you have on a pair of white shoes? You see them. That's the way I do. I see it. I see that you wouldn't be walking around unless there was something called life in you. Otherwise, we have a corpse. And everybody gets very sad and lonely looking and says, here lies the remains. I don't care about bothering with those. I'd rather talk to you. If there's somebody home, I can see them looking out through the little eyeball windows. And if there's nobody home, I don't bother to talk to them, okay? So I know that, okay? And I know it like you know you have on white shoes. I see it. How else better is there to know something unless you see it, okay? It's like, how do I know that little bit it there to the next to you is a very beautiful lady? I can see it. I don't have to ask somebody, well, do you think Julie is pretty? I don't know. I don't have to ask anybody. I can see for myself, okay? Okay, next one. Jim? Well, expecting is wishing and hoping and praying, and making up your mind is forgetting all that jazz and doing it, okay? You see, you expect based upon what you are entitled to. We talked this morning that everybody feels they're entitled to be non-disturbed, so they expect it. And then they're very frequently disappointed. And then they feel hurt, and then they look for blame, and they usually find it. And then they're angry or guilty or fearful or insecure. And then that requires adaptation. That stresses the body out. And then they expect that it'll go away because they went to see the doctor. And they didn't know that wasn't the reason to go see a doctor. Okay? Don't go to the doctor to get well. Do you? If you do, you get disappointed. She's got a question. I'll be right back, Lana. No, you were just stretching. Okay, Lana? Then you just know what you want. Do you know that? I don't know what should be. I don't know what ought to be. I don't know whether this folks that got together and blowed the thing, I don't know whether that was what ought to be or should be. It's just what she said she wanted. Who cares? Go ahead.
Well, going further, like you say for my daughter, I don't know what she needs, what I would do.
But you know what you want. Yeah. Why? It's because you were a mama. Okay, well then I only ask you what you wanted. I didn't ask her what she wanted. I know what she wants. I know what she wants today, maybe. It may already be over with. I started working on it last night. But I knew what she wanted when she called you, okay? But I don't care whether she gets it or not. I just asked you what you wanted. You were the one who was talking about it. She didn't tell me anything. You know what you wanted for her, okay? Fine, that's what'll happen, okay. Who cares whether she likes it or not? She didn't ask nothing. She just told you, huh? It has to be non-important to you, or you are only reporting anxiety, and it's response to anxiety. So when you're reporting what you want to do, there is really nothing to get anxious about. When it's something you want to have that you don't believe you can have, then you'd be anxious, wouldn't you, Carita? Okay. That you don't bother with. Call somebody else. Right. It's somebody that you know can make up their mind. Call them, say, I want it, and then you go away and forget it. Can you what?
We can make out a list of those that we can call.
Yeah, well, I'll send you a list of them. That's a very expensive list, I'll guarantee you. Just to know that information would be where the magicians hide out would be very expensive list. You know, people pay a whole lot for a name to mail a mail order letter to you. Think what you get for a list that lists all the magicians you could call. Or we're worth several bucks a name, shouldn't it, huh? You know, about 25,000 name or something like that. Well, stop there. Good gracious, you know, and go a little further. Okay, the next question. Keep them up. Yes, Nancy.
I don't know how to articulate.
I knew you wouldn't know how to do it, but just articulate it anyway.
I can have a hard time dealing with, morality in this. I mean, isn't there a line?
Oh, yes, there's jillions of them, according to which group you grew up. Because you see, what morality means, it's according to the mores of whatever community you're around. The mores of the community are quite different than the mores the community was a few years ago.
We are just a function of X, and we really know that. And
You're an awareness function of X, not a functionality. Well, I'm sure there is, because it's according to who you want to please or not please. Now, I think I said I wanted to be what to me was a good guest. So if I'm in somebody's house that doesn't smoke cigarettes and they don't have ashtrays in their house, I don't smoke cigarettes there. I go outside. I don't stay very long, or I take frequent trips outside. But I will not smoke in their house. Now, if I'm around somebody that never drinks coffee, I won't drink coffee in their house or even ask for it. But I will make frequent trips down to the coffee shop, okay? And if I'm around someplace that thinks you should always be dressed up with a three-piece suit and a tie and all that stuff, I'll wear it. You know.
Isn't that pleasing, though?
I don't know where it pleases them or not. I'm doing it because, to me, that is what a good guest does. If it pleases them, wonderful. If it don't please them, suits me, I don't care. That's not why I'm doing it. But you see, what we call morality is a man-made game. And so one bunch of people set up one thing that's moral, and another bunch set up something else that's moral, and somebody else set up something else that's moral. I don't know what's moral. I know many of the different rules of morality for different communities because I float around to different communities, okay? So when I'm in a certain community, I try to do it. I think the country folks had one for that. When you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. When you're in Russia, do as the Russians do. When you're in Poland, do like a Polak. So you don't have to wonder, because you don't offend people when you go by their mores. The folks across the river call it being simpatica. And simpatica says you respect my mores, and I don't have to consider yours, you know. They don't have to bother with mine, but I consider theirs, you know. So that's what morals are about. So if you grew up in a certain place, then you had a certain set of morals laid out for you, which you didn't want to keep, but you did by willpower. Is that right? But it wasn't because you wanted to, Nancy. It was a form of conflict for you, wasn't it? Right? Yeah, still is. I dumped all of them. I'm amoral. I don't have any. I'm not immoral. And I'm not moral. I'm just amoral. I don't have any, because I float around so many different places and with so many different sets of mores, I can't afford to have one of my own. I just simply can't afford to have one of my own. I just play with their rules wherever you are. You know, if you're going to play a certain game, you play according to the rules, or don't bother to play the game. Is that right? So I just don't have any for myself. I'm certainly happy to use anybody's. One set looks as good or as obnoxious as the other. Is that right, Harold? One set of them is as good as another. I don't care. They're all fine or worthless, immaterial. Okay? Next question, comment. Okay, let's take a 15-minute break and we'll start again on the hour. Which is 15 minutes until the hour now. We'll start Rita here. Is that going?
Let's see. You have to do them both at the same. Yeah, like that.
Like so. There it is.
Thank you.
Oh, go. Okay. We'll try to discuss something else for a minute to fill up the time. As long as we got it all done the first hour, now we're killing time, so we'll just kill a little. Jim asked about expectation a little while ago, so I would like to attempt to clarify if I can. expectation. Now, you can't do anything without having an expectation. You would never do anything unless you expected something to happen. I wouldn't go to work unless I expected somebody to come in. Otherwise, I got a day off. I wouldn't put a key in a slot and turn it unless I expected it to unlock or do whatever it's supposed to do when you put the key in there, would you? Would never put it in there. I wouldn't have come here today unless I expected there had been some people here. Now, there would be expectation based on fact. Reasonable expectation on facts or something that has a high degree of probability. Now, in that, you are seldom, if ever, disappointed. But now we base a lot of our expectation on an ideal. Now, an ideal is an illusion. Another word for an ideal is illusion. It just is a picture in the mind. If you look it up in the dictionary, it says the ideal, a picture in the mind. And if you look up picture in the mind, it says it's an illusion. So the struggle towards illusion is the disintegrating factor. Now, the big illusion that most everyone has is that you are entitled to be non-disturbed without using any conscious, intentional effort on your part. And when you do that, you're going to be frequently, if not very more often, disappointed. Now, this is what gets people into turmoil. It's not based on expectation on a fact. That's the way things work. But when you base it on an ideal, then you're going to be disappointed. If you believe that you will get through this world, no matter how beautiful you are, how talented you are, how high your IQ is, that you're going to get through this world without a little disappointment here and there when you are expecting that you are entitled to be non-disturbed. That's an illusion. So when you're disappointed, the next thing you do very quickly before you have time to look at it, you feel hurt. And when you feel hurt, you look for blame. Or you could say cause. Look for what to blame. That's where we got all this blaming bit we was talking about this morning. Look what to blame. And sure enough, I found out it was you. Then I'm angry. And if I find out it was me once in a while, I'll feel guilty. Now, of course, some of us are angry at ourselves, and so we are always finding we were to fault, and so then we are to blame. Is that right? And then I feel very guilty. And isn't that a glorious feeling to have all day? It's a nicey one, huh? And then when we've been around this and we try to find it, we can't find what to blame it on, then we feel fear. Now, you don't feel fear when a rattlesnake's spinning under your feet. That's startle. You don't feel fear when a tiger's chasing you. That's a startle, and you do something. You don't feel fear when a truck is about to hit you. You're startled, and you usually do something. It gets your attention. But when you can't find what to blame on, when you've been disappointed, then you feel fearful. Now, if you've been around this way lots of times, and you get so that you're always having these, then you feel insecure. Now, these four feelings, and of course there's a million synonyms for them, is what one would call stress. Now, you could have a jillion synonyms. You could have jealousy, which is a feeling of insecurity that your loved one cares for you. That's insecure, isn't it? Huh? That's what jealousy is, insecure. And fear, you could call a whole bunch of other good words. like excitement and a jillion other things, worry, concern, etc. And guilty you could call regret and all these nice words. And anger, of course, you could have righteous indignation, and you could have a whole bunch of other things to justify with, but they're all the same. So these four, man was never designed to have. He's designed to have feelings, but not emotion. And when you have them, they're stressful, and when you're stressed, you have mobilized and unreleased energy. When you build up a whole bunch of energy to fight or run, you don't do anything, then you can see, say, in the state of stress. Because the body is in a state of chemical imbalance and neuromuscular tension for the time, place, and circumstance. Would be fine if really what was happening is what you was imagining and fearful of and what you was angry with, somebody's going to kill you. You better have the good feeling of aggression and you go get him, you know. So there's a chemical imbalance and neuromuscular tension, which then requires adaptation. You can't live with the body in chemical imbalance and neuromuscular tension, so X goes to work to adapt. And that adaptation can take either of two directions. As we said this morning, the good people hold it in and don't ever express it, and they die young. So they have a form of adaptation of unusual cellular activity, which is a change in function of some part of the body. Some aspect, some organ of the body don't function properly. That's unusual cellular activity, which always produces unusual sensation, which, of course, is what everybody complains about, the pain, the soreness, the stiffness, the aches, the miseries, huh? And if you keep that up long enough, finally the tissue cells cannot continue indefinitely to do that, so there's tissue cell alteration or breakdown, which is then pathology. So if you go to all the illnesses, I'm not talking about injuries in the world, but all the illnesses, there would be a change in function, a change in sensation, and finally a change in the tissue, and that's all it is, regardless of what name you put on it. Because the name comes from where it is, not what it is. And the name comes from where it is, not what it is. So this would be the only way you would adapt physically. Now that'll finally destroy you. And that's why the good die young, you see. They didn't sound off with their anger. They held it inside. They felt guilty instead because they got angry. Did you ever get feeling guilty because you got a little ticked off? And full of fear because you don't know what to blame all these terrible symptoms on. It's some fantastic unknown disease that's attacked me out of the blue. And you're very insecure. So that goes. Now the other way of adapting is unusual behavior. Now, that will get you in jail, it'll get you in mental hospitals, it'll get you hated, it'll get you thrown out of the house, and all sorts of goodies. But eventually, if you keep that up long enough, it'll go into this, you see. But the unusual behavior kind of means you go on some sort of a binge. You know, you go home and kick the wife and throw the cat out, or vice versa, and a few things like that, and that's working off the aggression. Now then you're called an old reprobate then. Or you go on a drinking binge, or you go on a drug binge, or some other kind of chasing binge. Some people go on killing binges. So that's a way to work off your aggressions, and that's not a very popular one. However, it's probably less fatal than the other one is, if you don't mind spending a lot of